Welcome to the next edition of my Consumer Focus podcast, and I'm delighted again to be joined by the lovely Marie Claire, by the lovely Leila, and by the equally lovely Dave. How are you all?
Good, thank you.
Very well, thank you. Hot.
Hot, yes. It's been a record-breaking week, hasn't it, in the UK? 40 degrees plus. I think I got about 2 hours sleep last night. It is the worst night I've ever had, but there you go. That'll timestamp the podcast anyway. Not to worry. We're going to talk today about the future of the high street, which is a topic close to my heart and something that we've been talking about in the UK for quite a long time. But before we get there, I just wanted to touch base with you again on some of the factors that are going on at the moment from, for you as a consumer or as consumers in terms of how you're feeling about, the cost of living crisis, etc. And it seems like every time we turn on the TV or we turn on the news or listen to the radio, there's nothing but good news. Today, this morning, 40-year high for inflation of 9.4%. It's just crazy. So I have to say, I still think there's a gap in the market for a good news channel, but I don't know how much good news there actually is around at the moment. So it is a very real issue that obviously is affecting all of us. Can you just give me an idea of how you're feeling and how it's affecting you, Marie Claire? Any thoughts? Have things changed since the last time we spoke?
Well, I'm definitely still really considering my car use. And that's specific to where I live, being very central with the ultra low emission zone and congestion charge. But also, I have really noticed shopping and who is giving you a good offer and who isn't. And when we were laid up, the whole family with COVID, it had to be online shopping and going to Ocado. And I don't do that really regularly. It's a bit of if it's an emergency situation. And I found myself only buying deals on principle. So if something, we're not a very brand specific household. We don't have this, I'll only eat, certain brand. But I specifically went to anything that was half price or buy one, get one free on a principle, because it feels like you're being kind of robbed left, right and center. So where you can make a saving. And I have noticed also regularly, whatever I might be buying online, which has been in the last couple of weeks, certainly a lot more things, it's constantly showing me, this could be a coupon in here if you click this. It feels like certainly online there is a presence where you can get a good deal, but high street, not so much. I'm feeling.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. What about you, Dave? I mean, have you changed again? I mean, I know that last time we spoke, you talked about being really much more considerate in what you buy and certain products that before you wouldn't have thought twice about buying had become a treat for you, basically. So anything changed since last time we spoke?
Yeah, I don't think we should ever stop considering things that are luxuries or like cheese a treat. So I think that's an attitude I'm going to continue with. I never thought I'd be using the word frugal to describe my youthful generation, but I do think I'm being a little bit more frugal. I've maybe obsessively to some degree, like a convert, started doing like cashback and rebate apps, which sometimes I feel like they're trying to tempt you to get the latest product or bump their sales, but then occasionally you get something that is actually useful. Like I've got some energy drinks that I've been, multi-buying as part of my meal deal, and I get like 50p back on that, which is always nice. That goes into PayPal, which pays for my iCloud storage on my phone. So it's a circular economy of frugalism. But yeah, sometimes you also get like a little, cashback apps are probably like this generation's coupons, I'd assume, just don't cut them out. But then there's other useful stuff like bags of rice and stuff like that. So if these staple items come up, I'm not just trying to get away with trying to scrape back a few pennies, but actually go, I could use that, I could freeze that, I could put that in a cold, dark environment, as it says, and come back to that later.
Yeah, so you really are thinking about it actually quite strategically by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and I'll also only ever cycle to the nearby Tesco or whatever, so that's covered the travel because I've got my legs, and I limit myself to how much I can get in my rucksack. If it goes over that, if I can't physically hold it, then I'll know in the back of my mind that it could be over a budget or it's just too excessive and we're going to waste it, so let's not do that.
Very interesting. Leila, what about yourself?
I think for me, it's very much been about choosing my battles. You know, I've always had quite a hectic social life, you know, but I think maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I'd be going out for dinner 3-4 times a week. Now, I'm, you know, if I go out to eat, you know, more than 3-4 times a month now, I'm strapped for cash. And so it kind of, I have to be able to justify going out to kind of, you know, linking it to an occasion. Is it a birthday? Is it date night? Or is it, you know, whatever? But I won't just kind of randomly go to the pub, for example. You know, there has to be some kind of reason tied to it, which kind of stops me from, you know, limits me a little bit. And to Dave's point as well about the kind of bulk buying, so things like rice, whereas it's much easier to buy in the individual packets, which is, you know, multiple times more expensive. You know, we'll kind of batch buy, and you know, I've kind of stopped shopping online, doing food shopping online as much. So, you know, I'd sometimes have gone onto the apps like Gorillas and stuff, which, you know, they'll deliver food to you quite quickly, but they always come at a premium. Things are more expensive. And, you know, you've got Sainsbury's delivery, which is up to £7 per delivery. So, you know, that feels like a waste of money. So I'll kind of bite the bullet and, you know, walk to the shop as well to sort of do that. And I think that yeah, it's just generally kind of like reining it in and being a little bit more conscious. And also I've got the cashback feature enabled on my bank app as well now. So everything I spend gets rounded up and put into savings.
Right. And just, so obviously you're all being much more cautious and considered in terms of your consumption on that side of it. What we're reading about quite a lot at the moment, though, is that there's this kind of whole revenge travel thing going on, which I think is one of the reasons. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we're seeing all these issues at our airports, lack of staff, but ultimately demand is at a level that it's, you know, difficult to cope with. Have any of you got any travel booked? Is that something that you're actually still planning to do holiday-wise or anything?
Sorry, go ahead.
I've been away a number of times already this summer, and luckily none of my flights have been cancelled, but you do feel like you're kind of playing a bit of a risky game, you know, because I think actually what do you do if your flight does get cancelled, because it's not like there are loads of other alternative flights that you can get on that are empty, you know, like you're quite sort of stuck. So luckily, touch wood, that hasn't happened to me yet, and I think I've got all my travel out of the way. But yeah, the airport experience is has been pretty horrific. You know, like
from a budgeting point of view, you know, you're making lots of changes on kind of, you know, in terms of what you're buying on a daily basis, what you eat, where you shop, but it's not stopping you from basically getting away. And is that almost a kind of rebalance for you, where you're taking advantage of our relatively newfound freedom and getting away as often as you can? Is that what's going on there?
No, it's more that all of my travel plans have been in the diary for a number of months, and so they're all kind of coming to fruition now. So I'm like, oh God, actually, you know, like the sort of the accommodation, the flights and stuff were all booked a while ago. So yeah. I think had it been now, you know, I'm not making any kind of future travel plans for the rest of the year because, you know, there just isn't the money to do so. So yeah, absolutely. I think if I'd have been in this position a few months ago, I may not have made quite so many plans, because actually sort of, you know, when you get onto your holiday, you're then kind of watching what you spend as well. Yeah, and actually being in Europe now, it's not cheap. So yeah.
Absolutely. Marie-Claire, Dave, any holiday plans?
We have nothing booked, and this is an interesting one because my husband he hates flying anyway, but he has committed to never flying again, which really? Is a climate decision. But I've said, what about the rest of your family? And he said, well, I'll take a train, you can fly. But I actually, since the pandemic, have had no desire to book anything that seems stressful, could get cancelled. I've got too many friends who had maybe like 40th or 50th birthday celebrations in a cottage in the UK and everything had to be cancelled because of COVID and insurance wouldn't pay out.
Yeah.
So I've become quite risk averse, but UK holidays, definitely. I feel like we need to change the four walls, but I feel like nothing is making me want to fly.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Dave, what about you?
I don't know, like hotels.com keep emailing me talking about my perfect getaway from the city. And I'm like, those pictures look nice, but do I really want to? I mean, I'm the worst, right? So we're in July, and when annual leave at my work rolls over, and I never take it, even though I'm tired. So I'm the worst person you ask for about a holiday because I just never take them. But I do need breaks, and of recent, I'm taking advantage of those more.
Well, I think you need to make sure you do that, right? It's important to have the balance, obviously.
Yeah. But yeah, I haven't tipped over the point where I wanted to take a holiday. I kind of want to justify it, and I wouldn't want to call it a holiday either. Like in the back of my mind, right? I've always wanted to go with a couple of people in like a longboat down a canal to Somerset, if there are canals in Somerset, and go to all the orchards and drink all the cider and just enjoy it like a summery day, chewing on a piece of grass. But I don't even know where to start planning for that. But
I like your creativity.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call that holiday either. I'd call that a break, and I'd call it like an experience. So in my mind, I'd want to justify that. But interestingly, one thing that did feel like a holiday is I did some house sitting last week. And just because it wasn't my house, my bedroom, everything that I'm familiar with, it felt like a getaway. It was like 3 or 4 days, just like 2 towns over, cat sitting. But I really enjoyed that, and
Interesting. Well, maybe that's going to become more of a thing then. I'm literally about to book a flight to go to Australia on business for the ridiculous. I feel really bad saying this, given what you've just said, Mary Claire, about your husband. For my 24th trip to Australia in 12 years, which is a bit embarrassing to admit. But anyway, I mean, and it's almost 100% more expensive than it was in December 2019. I mean, it's eye-wateringly expensive. So anyway, that's the story for another day, but it's definitely not a holiday. It's definitely for work. Let's talk about the high street. So we've heard lots of noise over the last few years about, the high street's dead, which I'll put my cards on the table. I personally don't subscribe to that. I think that for me, it's got to go through a transformation, because arguably it's maybe some high streets around the country have become a bit dilapidated and become a bit run down and maybe don't have, the proposition, the quality, whatever that that we're looking for as consumers. But I'd love to get your thoughts. So I guess I'll start with you, Mary Claire. Tell us, if you don't mind, what do you think of the current experience on the high street in a general sense?
I feel like I've lost, not personally, but so many of the shops that were my go-to, I need a dress for a wedding or something, I need a top for a night out, Oasis, Warehouse, all gone online. Coast, another one. And I find it really sad because I'm not a good online shopper. I could take 10 things into a changing room and come out with nothing. So it's really important to me to feel it, try it on. So I don't buy from those brands, because also I can't risk having stuff piled up that I haven't got returned in time. So my personal experience in that regard is I find it a bit sad. Those kind of brands I used to go to have gone. And also House of Fraser was a big one for me, because my mother worked there at some point. I did, my brother did. We all had time growing up in Bedfordshire, where Milton Keynes, we'd all done our time in the handbag department. And it felt high end. I mean, not Selfridges, but it was like a John Lewis to me. And there used to be a local one at Monument by London Bridge. So if I did need something, I could trot over there and pick something up. And I think those things just disappearing feels a bit sad. And I don't think I'll ever become someone who's signed up to ASOS or Shein, not because I don't value it, but because of my personal shopping experience. I get the gratification from feeling good about getting something there and then, not in the post.
Yeah, sure. That's really good feedback. Layla, what about yourself? Any thoughts on the high street in terms of the current state of it and how it might evolve or whatever?
So I did go switch back to high street shopping for a bit after the pandemic, because I was finding it hard to, picture what I was buying, and thought it might be quicker to make decisions in person. To Mary Claire's point, to actually physically buy an item. But the range of things that you get in a physical store feels quite restrictive now in terms of the range. And also to her point about some of the go-to shops, like I used to love Topshop on Oxford Circus, but that's gone now. And, like you said, some of the other shops are kind of closing down too. So, and they haven't really been replaced with equivalents that are as good. So, if I go clothes shopping on Oxford Street, for example, there's not that many shops that I'd want to go in for the hassle of trekking all the way, getting the central line into Oxford Circus and traipsing on the high street. You go into a shop and it's hot and it's crowded, and I can only go at times when it's going to be hot and crowded. So yeah, I think it's kind of just generally a bit more inconvenient, and so I've kind of tended to sort of go back online, and I think the shops just, to me, don't feel like they're really doing enough to enhance the bricks and mortar experience, because people have got so used to online shopping now, and online shopping kind of spoon feeds you everything you want and need. So it's kind of like, what are shops doing to kind of make the in-store experience as good as online? I don't think they're there yet.
All right, we'll delve into that in a bit more detail in a bit, but thank you for that. Dave, thoughts on the high street?
I think a lot of you guys have talked about shopping and not about restaurants and stuff like that. And I know I got a bit peckish the other day, and I was just greeted with the same old Pretz and Costas and stuff like that. And it seems like that model of just, if someone's entered the market, we're also going to set up another shop that does exactly the same thing in that entire cluster. Is the high street dead? It's a bit carbon copy whichever city you go. I mean, we were just talking about holidays. Tell me that you wouldn't have taken a break in a UK city and then just known that there would have been a Starbucks or an H&M that you could have gone to in your hometown, but you bought a t-shirt while on holiday, so it's magical. So I think a lot of carbon copied stuff has kind of ruined it for us. And then I was looking at Twickenham High Street, which is where I live, and a lot of long-standing shops that have been there, not quite House of Fraser, but like the local shoe shop that have been there, shut down. A lot of the other businesses shut down. And the way that it's not dead, or its death is being dragged out, however you want to perceive it, is that I think local councils have messed up. I don't know enough details to speculate on that, because of business rates or something that's above my pay grade to understand, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's along those lines. But they've started not boarding up shops. They put just these nice frontages of them, like new business coming soon or business inquiries, and it shows people having fun times and drinking coffee and socializing, even though there's nothing behind that shop, and there isn't going to be for another 6 to 9 months, even at that. So
yeah.
So I think it's a shame to see it.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice in terms of it being above your pay grade. But you're absolutely right. I think there's a myriad of things going on as I look at it. I mean, you've got business rates which are extremely challenging for retailers and a little bit antiquated in terms of how they are determined in the first place. And I think that what's happening, and also you've got these ridiculous leases that retailers used to have to sign up for 25 years or whatever. Those days are gone now. So I think landlords are having to become much more flexible. Something has to happen with business rates. That's at a governmental level. And I think it's a local level. It's quite interesting. I live in a little village, but my local high street is High Barnet, and it's not particularly aspirational. And if you look at the demographics around the area, you think it would be a bit more like maybe, I don't know if you've ever been to Muswell Hill or Richmond or somewhere where you've got a really nice mix of quite a lot of independence and artisanal type, brands, food brands, retailers and so on and so forth. Anyway, long story short, we've got a Gales bakery opening up, which we're all, I don't know if you know the brand Gales, it tends to be probably more North London and maybe the centre, but we're all very excited about that. And we feel that that's a concerted effort by local authorities to start to actually up the ante and bring in some more attractive brands that actually bring people back to the high street. So we've also seen quite a really nice independent jewelers open, and Millets open, and a bunch of brands that just never used to be there, and you would imagine a couple of years ago would never have wanted to open up in High Street Barnet. So hopefully we're beginning to see, you know, the transformation of the High Street. But I'm interested. Sorry, Mary-Claire, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to speak to your point about Gales. So where I live in Bermondsey is just off Bermondsey Street, which is kind of known for its more sort of bespoke shops and cafes and restaurants, and nothing is branded. Nothing is you know, high street. And then I just drove past the other day, Gales Bakery is opening, and it's people's responses are great. That place that has been sitting there is finally going to be, you know, something, as opposed to just, you know, unlet. And then there's another wealth of people saying, but that's the first time, what are we going to get a Pret next? It's almost like an anti having anything that is known.
That's very interesting. I guess where we kind of need to get to is where we've got a balance, right? I mean, I would have thought the majority of consumers would probably welcome having some bigger brands on their high street, but mixed with a really nice, you know, level of independent and artisanal retail, which I think gives us then the, you know, more choice than we had. I think to Dave's point earlier about, you know, the homogeneity, if that word is, if I'm using the word correctly, you know, I do a lot of research of consumers, you know, and when I interview consumers on the high street and I say to them, what frustrates you about physical retail, that's the one thing they always come up with. Or there's two things. They always say there's not enough people to serve them when they go into a store. But the other thing is they say too many stores are just too much the same. The product's the same, it just feels the same from one town to another. So I think that's the way retail went, and I feel like we're having to go back to something that's a bit broader in proposition. Dave?
Yeah, if I can also interject and conclude it with a positive, and it actually comes back to Gales as well, would you believe? So Twickenham High Street is, you know, it's got a reputation for charity shops, and whatever the highest, lowest bidder is going to get that shop. We got 3 Tesco now. I don't need 3 Tesco. There is also the micro community on Church Street, which is just off the high street, and I think it's Twickenham's original high street. Now, there are local committees that will have certain patches. I don't know if it's across every town and every city, but there'll be a local committee, and that committee is all the store owners, the shop owners along that street, and they will all accept or reject if a business wants to open up on the street. So if they feel that it doesn't contribute to the community, to the vibe on that little unique side street, then they'll reject that application. I don't know if they've got the final say on this kind of stuff, but they've definitely got influence. And I know that I can tell you from the cobbled streets as you walk down and the bunting, it's got character. And I think it's because on a community level, people came together and said, yes, that shop would be great, or no, we're not having that. But a Gales did open up, so I don't know what level that was decided. I'm not excited.
Well, I don't think, you know, to be fair to Gales, you know, my perspective of Gales would be the product's quite good, and actually it feels more like an independent retailer. You know, it feels like an independent baker's. It doesn't feel like a big national food chain or anything. Yes, it's becoming bigger, and it's, you know, because it's popular. But in my opinion, anyway, I don't think that's a mindset that people maybe have. Some people have, but I think it feels like it can be quite a local business, a local proposition. But that's really interesting about the whole community element. And there's definitely something in that. There's something in the power of the people in the local community having some kind of say in what their high street should look like, and what the mix of brands, you know, that should be there. Just kind of segueing on from that, the high street, obviously, and we're beginning to talk about other entities, not just, you know, retailers where you can go and buy fashion. We're talking about food and everything. what should the mix of the high street actually include? Any thoughts, Dave? I mean, what, in an ideal world, if you had a blank bit of paper and you were going down to your local high street in Twickenham, what would you see there? And I mean across all different sectors, basically.
I'm trying to think of basic needs, if the heel of my boot broke, I would need a what they called?
Cobbler.
Cobbler. We need more cobblers.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I guess I don't know what you want. Let's just think of. I know this is a time which is way before mine, and it's sepia tinted, but cobblers for the basics, fixing his shoes, getting a key cut, a butcher's and a fishmonger's, I suppose, a chemist, a post office, and then what other essential needs do we have? Newsagents, everything in between that, I guess, could be more optional and lifestyle based, like clothing boutiques. But I'd happily move into a village that had those basics.
Yeah. So basically meeting basic needs the way that the high street did. I think when you go back to the 50s, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, as retail really evolved. Marie-Claire, anything to add to that?
I spent quite a bit of time down in Whitstable in Kent, and I really value that high street because it does have a Boots, a Sainsbury's local, a cobbler, as Dave would say, another really good pharmacist. It's got a Sainsbury's local. It's got a couple of clothing shops like Jewel and Fat Face and another kind of surfing brand, White Stuff. But then it has a lot of independent shops, which are really celebrated by the whole community about keeping things local. But it's also got a great shop called Whites of Kent, which is there for all your towels, bedding, nightwear. And it really does feel quite old school when you go in there. But the guy running the shop has everything you could possibly need. I rarely, when we're down there, ever have to think, I've got to go to another town to get X, Y, or Z, because they seem to have it all covered somehow.
It's quite interesting. There's a hardware shop. Whenever we need anything for the house, bulbs or padlocks or, anything like that, WD-40, there's a hardware shop on Cockfosters Main Street, just a mile and a half or so away from where we are, which is another of our local high streets. And I don't know what it is, but you can go in there and you can ask for anything. I guarantee you should almost set a challenge of trying to find something that they don't actually sell. And I reckon you wouldn't be able to find anything. It's quite remarkable. Layla, what about yourself? What about mix of proposition on the high street? Not just in terms of retail, but what else? Food and beverage, entertainment, etc.
Yeah, so I think that it's important that people see the high street as a destination rather than necessity. So obviously, like to everybody else's point, you need to have like Boots, Superdrug, pharmacy type thing, like clothes shop. I think gifts and cards are really important as well, because you always get caught short without somebody's birthday or whatever, but was that charity shops, clothes shops, but yeah, I think like what makes a high street feel nice, like a destination, is like nice kind of pubs, restaurants, cafes with tables out on the street. I think because people kind of walk past that and it feels a bit aspirational rather than all just being kind of concrete shops. So I live in East London, and so I think Bethnal Green Road is an interesting example of that, because it's kind of one end of it it's become really gentrified. It's now got a Pret and a Costa there, which much to all the local residents' dismay. But as you go down the other end, it used to be quite dilapidated, but actually kind of in amongst there, like the sort of the smaller cafes have started to put nice like sort of tables and chairs out, and you get kind of people actually then coming into the area to spend money to do a bit, like basically they'll come in to go to like whatever the cool quirky new cafe is or coffee shop, and they'll sit outside it and they'll take photos for their Instagram, but in doing so they're kind of also popping into the shops on their way to and from the station, for example. So it's quite good to kind of like pull in footfall from people who wouldn't otherwise go there, because there's like a cool cute new cafe there, or a bar with outside seating. So I think that kind of is really important.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. For me, the high street's got to be a destination, right? And we talked earlier as well about the experience in retail and about it needing to be more experiential, because if it's not, and if the high street isn't a destination, then why wouldn't you just buy online, right? Because it's just more convenient. So I think if you've got the right mix of, to Dave's point, if you've got the staples, the things that you actually need, along with, you know, maybe to Marie Claire's point, something, you know, something aspirational, but a nice mix of, you know, independent with maybe a sprinkling of some bigger brands. And then to your point, Layla, you've got that, you know, it's a destination. You've got a really nice mix of, you know, food and beverage and places that people want to go to. Then I think I can see in my mind's eye, you know, the picture of what the high street might look like in the future. Just one question in terms of the actual environment itself. Have any of you, aside from Whitstable, actually, let's start with Whitstable, Marie Claire. I mean, because I'm not sure if I was trying to think whether I've been there. I've got a feeling I might have been there once. But in terms of the environment, does it feel like a nice environment to go to?
Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, the destination part, I think for most people is the beach, but we are, you know, it's an all-weather place as well. And they have got the bunting out there as well, Dave, just like Church Street in Twickenham, which I know myself, having filmed there in a previous life. But it does have that real, it's got a sweet shop, an ice cream shop that is full of, it's got that sort of candy cane ice cream paraphernalia outside, and it's got great pubs and restaurants too. So it does feel like somewhere you want to be, and it's quite a joy to walk down the high street.
Yeah.
It's got antique shops as well, and quirky little places. And there recently, the school my daughter goes to decided to raise money for the PTA and invited everyone to have Crazy Hair Day. So while we were down there, I suddenly thought, oh, I haven't got anything for this. And on the Sunday, I went into a great shop there, which is similar to how you're describing this place. I forget what you say. And it's called George's Mini Mart. Cockfosters. This is George's Mini Mart in Whitstable. And you can get anything in there, including hairspray in every single colour. So it's almost like the place you go in and say, oh, I don't suppose you've got, and they always have it.
That's brilliant. Love that. Layla, anything to add to that?
I think so, like to my kind of earlier point, I think, you know, I like Red Church Street in East London, because that has a similar kind of vibe. You know, they've got sort of like nice high-end shops and stuff that I can't afford in it, but it's quite nice to go window shopping. And but they also have, you know, like it's quite nice just to walk down there, you know, go for lunch, go for meet a friend for coffee. You know, and it's sort of the experience of that is quite nice, you know, kind of by coincidence, by proxy rather, you'll just end up going into one of the shops. Same with Broadway Market as well, which is quite similar. You know, you won't necessarily buy stuff, but you'll kind of walk past the shops by proxy.
Yeah, sometimes you'll just go for the experience, right? So Dave, any particular environments that appeal to you, or what you think they should be doing, what they should feel like?
I don't know. I'm not a markety kind of guy. I mean, I'm working in Islington right now, and we've got 2 markets, Exmouth and I forget what the other one is.
It doesn't have to be a market. And actually, sorry to cut across, I mean, Islington, I think, is a great example, right? I mean, Islington, the High Street, or whatever the name of the road is, you know, as you go through Upper Street, is it? I think, you know, it's got a really nice feel to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, Upper Street, Camden Passage. I think, like what Layla was saying, actually, a lot of these quirky places, if that's the right word to use, sometimes you don't go in there, but you do window shop, or you note it for somewhere to go later for a date, or somewhere to meet up on. Actually, should I should I share this?
We can always edit it out.
I was going to say I was let's be careful how we use this word. I was nagged to book a date in, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll do that. I'll be organized. I'll take control here. And I ended up choosing going to the Ivy Cafe, and it wasn't because I thought it would be a good date, it's because I wanted to go there. So I guess certain places that you do go past and you note and you log for later is what comes back, and then you eventually end up spending your money and helping that local economy. I don't know if that answered the question too well.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I can't remember the name of it, but I went to Colchester, and Colchester is actually won awards for the way they've transformed their kind of town centre, if you like. And there was one particular retailer there that was in the vintage space, selling vintage wear, vintage fashion. And what I really loved about it is you went in and there was a little corner. It wasn't a big shop. I mean, it was literally a couple of 100 square feet, but there was a corner that was set aside with a few chairs, and you could go in and have a cup of tea, cup of coffee, you know, a scone, spoon. You could buy some products, you could listen to music. And on a Friday, this is prior to the pandemic that I actually went there, but I'm sure they're doing this again. On the Friday night, they would clear all the products were on rails, and they cleared the floor, and they had a little stage at the back of the shop, and they'd have a band on. And so this kind of idea of multi-purpose retail, I think, is maybe one of the ways that things might transform in the future, you know, where we make more use of the space. Because when you think about it, again, retail is only accessible during the hours that the shop's open, or during the hours that, or online if it's a multi-channel business. But from a physical point of view, you could make much more use of the space, you know, if only you had the local authority allowing you to have the flexibility to repurpose it that way. And I think one of the other things that will make an impact actually is that whilst we've all historically moved out to the suburbs, like me, I'm just inside the M25 now, but actually what we're doing is we're now moving back in, and as we increase single dwelling households, etc., you know, more and more people, whether they're empty nesters or whether they're younger and they're not having kids, or they're, you know, single dwelling, you know, they'd rather be where the action is, and the action isn't really in the suburbs. The action's in, you know, the local town centre, or that's where it's kind of going again. So that will make a difference as well, because more and more people will be living around the areas of our high streets in a way that they probably haven't done for, you know, the last 20, 30 years. Listen, I really enjoyed that. I love talking to you guys, and I always learn something from all of you in terms of, you know, the reality of what's going on out there right now, and what your perspectives are of how things need to change in the future. So hopefully people listening to this particular episode can take some good learnings out of that. Retailers listening to it need to understand that, you know, we need to be not just demonstrating empathy through our marketing communications and telling people we're there for them and we care about them, but we need to obviously deliver that through the deals, the prices, and how we make products as accessible as possible, as we're all going through this incredibly challenging period. And I know it's difficult for retailers because they're facing increasing costs in their supply chain for everything, for their energy and everything else, and the cost of goods to them are going up. But at the same time, we need them to be as flexible as they can, and not passing that on to us and giving us, you know, the ability to, you know, procure products and services at a rate that we can afford. So I think there's a lesson learned, and hopefully what we've done is painted a pretty good picture of what we might do with our high streets both now and in the future. One last thing I wanted to ask you, actually, just before we sign off from this episode. I've always had this view that John Lewis and some of these bigger brands that wouldn't normally open up on a local high street, in a smaller high street, because their traditional model is these massive, big, tens of thousands of square feet, you know, stores. I've always thought, why couldn't you take a curated range and open up in High Street Barnet, for example, and behave like an independent retailer? You know, what were your thoughts on that? Do you think is that something that you would find interesting, Marie-Claire?
I love John Lewis, and it is a go-to for, and I love the fact that they've now got like an everyday range. So they have stuff that's really affordable for most people. Yep. In a kind of how they market it as basics, but it all works and is lovely. There is I think something like what you're talking about at St Pancras, so in where there's the Fortnum and what have you. Yeah. And it's great, and it feels like they're curated around gifting, probably because if someone's come over on the Eurostar, they might want to take something back that's traditionally English. So maybe something bigger than that I would love to see, because I've gone in there before and thought, oh, it's great, but I'm not looking for a gift.
You're a bit underwhelmed. You're a bit underwhelmed, yeah.
But just because of the size of the propositions there, they just don't have enough space. But something maybe twice as big again, I'd love to see.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Dave, Leila, any thoughts on that?
I think so. I know that Westfield already does this in in some capacity. So the White City one has much more upmarket shops than the Stratford one, for example, and that seems to work fairly well for the audiences. I would definitely welcome the idea of kind of department store model. I think for a local, for local sort of areas, I think they'd have to be careful about the kind of brand continuity when it comes to what they were offering, because obviously it's their name that's there. But I think that's it's an interesting opportunity potentially to host pop-ups, other other kind of like sort of smaller stores, or kind of temporary temporary kind of features. So it's to showcase a business which then gets springboarded onto kind of bigger and better things, because it's had that exposure and that brand equity from the department store. So that's a really interesting idea. I mean, I guess on a larger scale, Carnaby Street does that quite well. They kind of host multiple pop-ups kind of throughout the year. So yeah, it's an interesting proposition. I think it would just need to be managed carefully.
Yeah. Dave, anything to add? Or?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I think you've got the credibility and the assurance, the quality assurance that you're going to get the top of the range of whatever that select range is. I think I just need to get over that. I'd prefer it to be an independent store over a massive chain doing it. I don't know if everyone's going to have that attitude towards when Gales eventually takes off in 5 years and it's on every street corner and it's kicked out Pret. I don't know if we can return to this, but yeah, I think curatorial, I think that's a really nice word. I think you're going to get, the absolute attention on exactly what it is you ask for when you go into a shop of that kind, no matter where it comes from.
Well, that's what you get, isn't it? From smaller independent stores, you get a much more personal experience. I mean, generally speaking, they know who you are, they know where you live, they probably know who's in your life, they know what you like, what you don't like. They often even have products set aside for you, right? If you're a regular customer, and I think that's what you miss to some extent with larger, obviously more national retail chains, but maybe smaller curated versions of their larger self might be something that would work in these areas. Anyway, certainly something for them to think about. And I think along with a nice, good mix of independent retail with some larger brands, nice environments like Whitstable and Kent and the other places that we've spoken about, with the right food and beverage, and I think also within food and beverage, having a good mix of maybe one or two larger brands, but with a good sprinkling of local independent brands as well. I think put all of that together, and all of a sudden you've got the high street as a destination and somewhere that people would want to visit. And if we can just sort out the parking and local transport, public transport as well, then I think I would certainly encourage more people to go back to the high street. Dave, Leila, Marie-Claire, as always, really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you the next time.